All right, welcome to another Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, we are going to take a look at the main rulebook changes for Parabellum's game Conquest: The Last Argument of Kings. For this, the goal is to talk about the large differences. We're going to try to also talk about some of the nuance as we see it. Now, this is day one of release. I've looked over this a bit. It's currently still the 12th. It's like 10 p.m. I've recorded about 4 or 5 other videos so far, so we're still going strong here on this particular day. And what I will say, though, is we're going to bring up the changes that we see, the changes that I notice, what that means overall for the game. There is a chance that we miss something. Parabellum Games is really good about highlighting in red things that change, but they don't always show you stuff that's deleted. So we're going to try to pick up any of that nuance. But let's face it, there's going to be some nuance that gets discovered as we go along as well. And there's always a chance there's a cleanup of something that becomes unintentional that they do fix later. So this is the best as I can see it right now. Leave the comments if there's anything that you notice, anything that you think is really good, any sort of facets to these rules that I missed. Maybe there's something really cool aspect that we didn't quite notice or pick up on at the time, especially as we get into the next week or so where people really try out and digest these rules. But I wanted to get this out for anyone who is looking through to get an idea of what it all means, as well as in case you're in a position where you can't sit down and read through the whole book, you can kind of listen along. If you are buying things for Conquest and you're enjoying our content and you want to save some money, we do have a discount code put below. The code is Train Kickers. We also have a link that you can click on to go into so that you can save 10% on anything you buy, and it does help us out as well. So if you're looking to save some money and help us out, great way to do it. All right, let's take a look at the book now. I do have the new book pulled up here. I'm going to be scrolling through it to pick out these things, but I'm going to talk about them as I scroll as well. I've reviewed it a few times and caught most of the stuff. Again, there might be some little nuance, but we're going to make sure of that. So, there's a couple big changes to the game in general. One of the biggest changes they start is they add a new type. So they add chariots. They're adding this because City States is going to have some chariots. And they just add that, hey, when the stands, hey, monsters and chariots are a little bit different. A chariot is essentially two bases slapped together with a character or something, not as a character, but essentially a model placed on top. So that's what they're talking about for chariots. They show us a picture, and you can count that right there. There's a chariot. They talk about how chariots are size 2, so the same thing as brutes, cavalry, and all of that. So in any spots where they talk about these units, same thing when they get to terrain and they say, hey, this happens to cavalry. Oh, the same thing happens to chariots. So if they are hit as minuses, chariots have similar minuses. So that's one of the biggest things to start off with, is that now you have these chariots. For the next biggest thing, let's scroll through and find it. I know what the different pieces are. There we go. Next biggest thing, and they mention this in multiple places, is that character stands no longer have a type. They no longer have a size. So we used to think about them as light, medium, or heavy. Your characters now become the type of whatever the regiment is that they're in. So this changes a lot of things. There used to be the old trick, and it made sense to do. I know some armies could do it better than others. But if you have a light regiment with a medium character, the character stand would have been scoring. I saw this in some of the Wadroon units, because if I remember correctly, the raptors are light, but the huntress is medium. So a huntress on a raptor, she sits in the unit. Hey, now it can score. There's other factions that could do the same sort of thing. Nords had abilities to do that and all of that. So some factions didn't have this specifically, so I mostly play Old Dominion. Old Dominion, our light characters only really took light units, or vice versa. Or another way to put it is our medium characters didn't take light units. Our light character took light units, which means you can never take advantage of it. So they just removed that. I think that's a really great change. One, it removes some of the balance problems of unintentional scoring units, or unintentional ease of scoring units, or the reverse. I have a medium unit with a light character in the middle. I'm scoring except for this one stand, and maybe that's the stand that's touching the objective and all of that. It just it makes everything nice and uniform, which I think is really a great thing. And also for anyone who's picking up the game, it's a nice simplicity of that group is whatever you say they are. There's no concern otherwise for it. There is now an official pass in the game. So, as an action, both combat action or out of combat action, you can pass. I know, at least for my purposes, there are plenty of times as a wargamer that we effectively pass. This unit, they're not really going to do anything because nothing good they can do. The problem with that in the technical sense is that they still technically had to choose actions. There was no action of don't do action. Now, where this matters is your opponent could have a rule, or you could have a rule, that when you pick blank action, something occurs. So, what they will tell us, and we'll see this in a bit when they talk about it, is that when you choose to pass, even if you pass both of your actions, you still count as activated. So, certain things like Aura Death, which is essentially when they activate, you'll still be activating, you're still activated. So that goes off. But if you have another ability on, say, your opponent has an ability that says, when they do this action, when they perform an action, well, pass isn't an action. So you do not count as having taken actions. So anything that requires actions, you don't bother doing. It is a useful change, and it will change some of the special rules and all that your units may have. So that is another big action or big change. They both have both in combat and out of combat for that. Next big one that we're going to get to should be reforms, if memory serves. Oh no, sorry, take aim. Take aim. Take aim has always given you +1 to hit in range combat. So +1 to your volley. Still same idea, but it gives you the aim shot special rule. The reason that is important is the aim shot special rule. There is now other ways to automatically have it. Deadeye shot, I believe, is the rule that gives you always having aim shot. And it also specifies that basic thing of if you would get to a 5, you don't become a 5, you go to a 4 and you reroll 6s. Alright, next big change is reform. Reform changed in 2 ways. First one is that they helped clarify the overall when you reform exactly what it does in terms of your movement. So, during the reform, no stand may move further than the regiment's lowest march characteristic, and no stand may move further than its march characteristic. To me, that seems a little repetitive. If you can't go more than your lowest march, than the regiment's lowest march, but you can't go more than yours, how could it ever be more? You know, I'm not sure in that one. That one seems a little weird to me. Because if you're not going more than the lowest, then yours is never lower than the lowest, so don't go more than that number. There's something I'm missing, and I'm not sure entirely what it is, but there's a nuance there that I don't see. If you do get some extra nuance in there, put it in the comments below, because that one, I don't see the distinction. I will tell you the distinction here, though. When you read a little further up in here, it talks about, okay, the Reform Regiment immediately adopts a new legal formation, and this down here tells you what it means to do legal formation moves and everything like that. Then you may turn to face any direction. The current understanding, my understanding as well as the understanding of everyone I've seen so far, is that these 2 rules are separate. So you adopt the new legal formation without moving too far, then rotate. This alleviates the problem of, in the past, part of the way it was worded, your rotation and this all counted together. And that causes issues. That's no longer an issue that you have anymore. So that means you can do both of these 2 things. So you can adopt the new formation without moving too much, and then you may rotate as much as you need to get the good facing. I've absolutely used this idea on my Cataphracti for reforming to be able to get into good arcs to hit people and all of that. So it's nice to see that it's separated. And it's nice to see that when you reform, you actually get to reform. If both had to go together, you barely get the turn at the end of the day. This literally lets you turn a lot. And that also helps when you're taking a look at someone like City States, who might have have a lot more ranks than files kind of units, so they can kind of readjust and then still do full facings instead of really not moving at all. Checking for obstructed, you have to look at both the size of the unit that's shooting and who they're shooting at. If the terrain is that size or larger, considering both of the units, then you're obstructed. So they added more to that. That was not the rule before. They talk about pass. Pass is exactly what we said it was. Regiment or characters can choose to pass. You can choose many actions as you wish to pass. You count as having activated, but you don't count as actually having performed actions. So if a rule says when you do blank action or when they do blank action, didn't happen. I think a lot of us played base somewhat that, but it's nice to put it in officially because there are cases where that is important distinction. Sorry, I thought I saw something. Nope. Okay. A lot of that is the same. Combat reform, same exact idea as the reforms that we talked about. Whether it's clean or in combat, same sort of ideas. The other thing they specified, I don't know if anyone did this, but when you do a clean reform or a fighting reform, you cannot go into a different arc than you already were in. So if you're in your opponent's front arc, your reform can't put you into a flank. That's what that says. I don't know if you technically could have done that before, and I don't know if anyone did. I never did, because that seemed like you shouldn't be able to do it, so I never bothered. But they classified that no, you can't. And pass, hey, in combat, you're allowed to pass as well. That's probably where it's more useful, because it's not forcing you to do anything, so you don't have to clash if you don't want to, because maybe someone has lethal demise, and you don't want to get destroyed, or when you perform an action, they get to do a bonus of something. I'm thinking like some Spires stuff, because Spires tend to have like the tricksy hit you back things. So they removed all of that. Allocating wounds is the same as it's always been. Morale is the same as it's always been, at least as we've seen. If they've changed something else, I haven't seen it. When we look at the advanced command rules are the same. Remember, you don't have retinues anymore. Your retinue models now count as other models. You can find out, they tell you what those models count as, so you can run them as different upgrades. So they do actually give you official what some of those things are. Character profile just talks about the fact that you no longer have this type in class. Your class will be dependent upon the unit that you go into. They mentioned that a whole lot. Oh, the other big change. The old rule used to be characters were front rank and didn't matter where they went, because your command stand was the middle. Now characters are the middle, and your command stand stands next to them. So they've now specified where characters have to go. Makes a lot of sense, lead from the middle, but there's absolutely been cases where I have a character, especially if they're a caster, I have them off to one far side, so that way if someone charges me, there's more likely the fact that they're not going to be quite there. It can help for line of sight purposes and things like that, or some other issues, but I tend to try to run my casters to the side. Also, not necessarily even so much when someone hits me, because maybe that really doesn't do much, because they can maximize well and all. Where it helps me is if I'm off to the side, that means I can have my caster here, and my unit way over here, and I can still reach, and then I can still be influencing the board on the other side. So I can be touching an objective here, caster far on this end, and then reaching the units way over here. You can no longer do that. All right, character stands and attachments. This is one of probably the biggest change in the game. When your character stand goes, once they're done their action, you may choose to immediately draw your next command card and reveal it. If the command card belongs to the regiment that character is in, that regiment may activate. Now, I'm going to use Old Dominion as an example, because that's what I play. If you have an Archimandrite in a Legionnaires unit, the Archimandrite has just cast a very good spell, hit someone with it. You may choose, if you wish, to draw the next command card. And if it is a unit of Legionnaires, and your characters, specifically your character's unit of Legionnaires, has not gone yet, that specific unit may now go. If you have multiple Legionnaires units, drawing the card after the character doesn't let one of the others go. It has to be the one the character's in. This is different than, one of the Wadroon, I think it's one of their song abilities, where you get to pull a card, that card gets to go. There's some things like that. No. Has to be the one that the character's in. Now, this is a choice. You don't have to. We do know a facet of this game is activating characters at unuseful times to just stall. Here's your fighty character. I'm nowhere near combat. My fighty character is going to go first, so that way I can see something you do. If you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. And even if it's behind them, you don't have to do this. But if you choose to, you may. But notice, if you do draw the card, you activate it. So your choice is either don't draw it, or draw it, and if it's there, it goes. Or obviously, you could fake draw something, it's not the right thing, they do not go. So, or if you really want to delay it, if it's saying a unit of Legionnaires, have that Legionnaires unit go earlier, something like that. There's other options. Monsters obviously can't do it this way. So if you're a character with a monster, so you're an Ardent Karawa on top of, a Shaper I know can go on top of a Helldrake. Karawa might be able to go on one of those as well. I don't remember which giant monster they can go on. You can't do that. So you can't have your shaper go and then your hell beast go right after it, or hell drake. I think they're called shapers. I know they're really annoying when they're fire spells. I haven't done the twig one yet, but the fire spells are always gross. So they don't let you do that. For duels, very interesting change to duels. Duels don't break you anymore when you fuse them. Duels do everything but break you. So remember, when you break, you don't count to seize objectives anymore. The regiment uses lowest resolve characteristic. You cannot be inspired. They add a little bit extra here. You reroll resolve tests of 1 now, and you can't decline any more duels. Well, that's what breaking was. However, it never says that they break. So you no longer have this problem of refusing a duel, breaking, and then the unit hits you with however many would break your unit, but that means now they're shattered and they're removed. So you'll get all the minuses, except for the minus of breaking turning to potentially shattering in the future. Also keep in mind that there was always the piece of when you're broken that you could never refuse a duel. So actually, that is something that I want to check real quick. Okay, so I'm back up to broken, just to make sure we review exactly the distinction. You don't break. You essentially, when you refuse a duel, you get almost all the effects of break, although there are some small distinctions. Using that lowest resolve when you're broken, you can't up it for any reason. All right, can't charge. You're not removed from charging, so that's fine. Can't be healed or stands restored. That's not there either. No objectives. Can't be inspired. Can't refuse duels. And if you are broken, you can unbreak. So there is now some distinction in that. So a few spots where that matters. That does mean that if you are broken, you are still not able to refuse duels. Or if you already refused a duel, you may not refuse another duel. So for all intents and purposes, that part is very similar. However, when we take a look at this, they said, you don't get your objective zones, same in both. Lowest resolve, although notice, this one is the lowest resolve characteristic in the regiment. It doesn't say that it can't be buffed. So if you do buff your lowest resolve characteristic by wording, based off of their precedent, you could use that. No inspired, and you reroll those resolve tests. So it's a bigger hit in certain ways, but then you are still allowed to charge in this. This way stops you from charging, and there's no way to remove this. If you refuse the duel, it's until the end of the round you have all these effects. There is no removal. This is good and bad. One, this is going to add a complication you're going to have to keep track of, because it does track different stuff. Before, when it was broken, you just had to remember what broken was. However, this does mean that if you refuse this, you could still charge, you could still do some stuff, and if you're worried about an enemy hitting you, it's safer now, in general, to do this. So, refusing duels on your characters, because keep in mind, you're not allowed to leave regiments anymore. I don't know if we said this yet, this might be the next thing we're about to get to, is there's no more seek new escort. It's not a rule in the game anymore. There are certain things like the Nomadic Assassin that has the rule because they have a different set of special rules. But that means if you have your caster in a unit that's reasonably light, your caster's stuck there. And your caster doesn't want to accept challenges. You can refuse it and your unit can still do quite a bit of things. There's certain issues it has, but it has different options. So I do like that overall because breaking, the act of it breaking going to shattering was probably a bit much. Okay, choosing spell and target. If it's to hits, you can keep going all in the same unit. Otherwise, a regiment or character stand can't be targeted by the same spell more than once in a round. Like I said, if it's a damaging spell causing hits, that's fine. But your buffs and your minuses can't stack on the same unit. That also means that, like, if you're looking at healing, if you have multiple healers, they can't heal the same unit multiple times through magic, all of that. So a nice way to kind of really spread out the magic. So overall, I do like that. There's a little bit related to terrain. I'm not going to go through too much of it. Cavalry and chariots essentially work the same. So if it affected cavalry before it affects chariots the same exact way, that's really all it says. The way you take negatives is the same way you've taken negatives on your cavalry. Draw events are largely the same. What the draw events are and the types of events that they are have not honestly changed. Special rules have changed. I'm not going to go through all the special rules and talk about every little change. I'm going to talk about the big sweeping changes. So, biggest change overall is that when you read a special rule, often it will say the character only gets it if the character has it as well. So, as an example, let's take a look at. Of course, now I can't find one where it does that. No, it's not Dread. Not Inspired. I know there's quite a few of them. There it goes. Like Hardened. Oh, you negate some cleave, some impact, some armor pierce, and all of that. Character stands do not benefit from the special rule during duels unless they have the special rule. Indomitable. Characters do not benefit the special rule during duels unless they have the rule. So if you're in a duel, your character only gets it if they have the rule themselves. In general, there's a lot of these that talk about, in duels, no, you don't have it unless you have the rule itself. So that's absolutely something they talk about. That's the biggest one, honestly. So I said before, if your character doesn't have it, specifically for duels. Some of the other ones aren't really changes. They're more of word cleanups. Phalanx really isn't a change. All the things that it said there in Phalanx is what you had. It's just cleaner. Rider being a base rule is just cleaned up. Overall, that's the biggest thing that I noticed. I didn't notice anything too else big in there. I know some characters had Rider and other things as well to talk about what it did. They classified Rider as a separate rule now. And if you get other bonuses, like if you get to re-roll something, that is now on your rule, not part of the Rider part. So they'll reference it as two separate things. So now on your character, rather than your Apex having a paragraph, it can say you have Rider, and then if you got something else, cool. Shield, again, if your duel, it doesn't count unless you have a shield yourself. Unyielding doesn't work if you're broken, of course. It talks about tenacious, trample, all those sorts of things. Most of those are identical. Inspired is pretty much exactly the same. It just mentions the fact you don't get it during impact. However, shock you do, and shock does say it adds to your clash characteristic, so we know you can use it there. Forced forward is the new way to get flank. That is the special rule with, I've been recording a bunch of these, so sometimes my words are escaping me for a quick moment. Since you can't take all of your retinues as you used to, one of your levels of retinues in many armies used to give you flank. Now for the models where they want you to have flank, or where that was something that you often took, they now have forward force, which just gives you flank. So not really different there. Dead shots, like I said, it gives you the aim special shot, which gives you the +1 to shoot. Bloodlust overall is just cleaned up. I don't really notice much of a difference. I will admit I don't have the previous rule in front of me because I downloaded everything but the previous rule set, so I am missing this currently. But when I read through it, I didn't read it very different. Most of these, other than like duels, you don't get it unless you have it. That's about what most of it is. Let's see. Aura Death. I honestly didn't really notice any difference in there. Maybe it's just cleaned up, but I've had Aura Death and I've read through it multiple times and I didn't see any difference. Actually, because I haven't updated my app yet, at the current moment when I'm talking, the apps are updated, but I haven't done it myself. So I can take a look at Aura Death and see if it's any different, but I don't believe it actually is. Okay, they made a nice and simple clarification that I guess maybe some people play this way. I never did. But the clarification they added in here was the fact that this only happens when the regiment goes, not when the character stand in the regiment goes. Specifically says, it's the last line right there. The special rule does not trigger at the draw command card step of a character stand's activation. So your characters don't trigger it. Maybe some people are using it that way. I never was. So little spots like that. So the overall part with characters is they no longer have a type. They're the type of the unit. They no longer can leave the unit. They don't have Seek New Escort unless you have the rule that allows you to do so. You will have a special rule that does that. In a duel, you don't get your regiment's special abilities. You only have your own abilities. But also certain things that affect regiments don't necessarily hurt you either. Stuff like Aura Death and all of that. That's overall the biggest special rule changes. Most other things that I saw at least were reasonably small. I didn't notice too many missing rules other than spots where they might have cleaned up. And then, of course, you have your base rules for how the game is played. That has not changed. All right, so that is a reasonably short video that goes over all the different changes, all the different rules that are happening for the game now. If I missed something, I do apologize for having missed it. If you see something I didn't, or you happen to see a change that you think is more impactful than I brought up, especially if it relates to your army that maybe I'm not as well versed in, please let us know down in the comments below. Overall, I really do like these changes. I do think they cleaned up a lot of stuff. I think they made a lot more sense with characters. I think your reform, being able to rotate as you need, is absolutely useful and very vital. It just cleans up the game a lot more than you need. Almost every game that's rank and flank has a way to just fully 180. This game, by the old rules, you really couldn't, depending on your size and speeds. Hey, nice and cleaned off. You have the new type. You have this chariot type that you're going to end up needing. Everything quite good. Nothing changed that much. Be sure, though, if you are the type who ever refuses a challenge, write down or have available to you what that means now, because you're going to mix up the two of broken and that, because it absolutely is different, and there's some stuff that has that broken doesn't. So it's a good idea to have that in a little reference next to you. That's what I'm going to do personally, because half of my characters always refuse challenges, and now it's not broken. I don't know. They might refuse them less often, because before I could refuse it, and my character goes next, I could just unbreak. And because maybe my character wasn't going to do anything good, unbreak, and now my unit can do it at once. That does change a little bit the nuance of what you're going to do. I'm curious to see, once you played a game, once you played some games, let me know, were you finding that you were more afraid to refuse a challenge, or you're more willing to refuse a challenge? Because I'm not sure which one I'm going to actually do. Interesting. We're going to have to see. Oh, that means bodyguard better have changed. Thinking about it, because bodyguard was the fact that you didn't break when you refused the challenge. All right, so this is me cutting in here while in the middle of my editing. So bodyguard isn't on any units now in the game. So the rule is still there. The rule doesn't work because it relates to essentially not breaking when characters refuse duels, but that's no longer a thing. They're obviously going to be doing some updates. There's obviously some changes they're going to have to talk about. And Leo has said those sort of things. So we're either going to see the rule removed, or we're going to see it change in some way and then maybe come back to units. But I had a bit of a discussion of that, but I cleaned it up once I looked back through and found out that no one has bodyguard anymore. So it's essentially just a dead rule sitting there. And I'm sure it's going to be worked out in the future, but they at least didn't break anything by missing it. They removed it. So back to the rest of it. So remember, if you have any product that you want to buy, we have a discount code below. You can save yourself some money and help us out as well. You will be seeing this video, as well as a video for all the different factions, including Sorcerer Kings, coming out over at least the next few days. The Sorcerer Kings one I'm looking forward to doing, and I found out tomorrow I get to work from home, so I don't have to spend multiple hours driving in and all. So I'm going to try to record that tomorrow. I don't know though. That one's going to be a really long video, so I'm gonna have to see. That one might take me a couple days to kind of get through. Or I might have to portion it out into pieces because I don't know if I can sit down for 3 hours and talk Sorcerer Kings at the moment. And I don't know if either of my other two co-hosts are keeping up with enough to kind of bring them on for that. If any listeners are really big fans of the game, obviously let me know, and I'll absolutely have you on for some thoughts about it. Maybe not the overall discussion, depending on time, but we could absolutely have some talks and discussions about this. I would love to do that. But I believe that's enough. So look for this. Look for a bunch of other Conquest videos. Look for some other stuff when I'm able to. But there will be some other stuff. There's going to be another Imperialis battle report coming up end of this week. It's all edited. I'm just waiting a few days to put it out. But all that's going to be there. I'm hoping to record some more battle reports for this very soon. Next week or so is a little bit busy, but I'm hoping after that to be able to do so. There's another store I'm going to start going to. My hope is that I can record there as well, because that gives me some more options. All right. Well, on behalf of all of us here then at the show, has a good hobbying, it's a great gaming.